Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Motormouth and Wild Bill Winters and Rick Curti. How are you tonight, guys?
I'm doing great. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing fine, thanks. What about you, Mr. Curti?
I'm doing well. How's everyone doing out there?
We're doing real well.
What's up, Mr. Ricky?
There you go.
How are you?
All right, so tonight's focus on the broadcast is we're going to talk about some top headlines, and let me tell you, we're top heavy, all right? And we're going to lead off with this one. Broncos star player Von Miller has a corona case of COVID-19 per his agent. What are your thoughts about Von Miller being the first football player to get it, and does this make life a little bit more difficult for the league with the Iron Shield? What do you think, guys?
I'll go first. The NFL season was already a big question mark like everything else, and it's not a big surprise. You hear a football player getting testing positive for this. I'm sure you're going to hear many more that are going to test positive for this. So the NFL, like everything else, had a big question mark. It's not good, but I mean everything's like got a big question mark because of the COVID-19. So not surprising at all.
This one looks like it's going to have more of an exclamation point than a question mark if we get more of these coming out. What do you think, Bill?
So he got tested and he's found to have the coronavirus, correct?
Yeah, his agent confirmed that Von Miller has.
How many of the players have been tested?
I don't know. Well, the focus is on Von Miller. I'm sure that information will come out. But
right. The more I'm looking into this, the more my gut instinct is telling me is there's going to be a lot of players that are going to have this. But the thing I'm looking at is, do these guys have the fever, or they just carry the symptoms of the coronavirus?
Right.
Because we still deal with a lot of unknowns of whether or not people actually have it and are walking around and just asymptomatic and don't have a fever. So nobody really knows how many players have this. So I think this is a work in progress. I don't want to overreact to the fact that he's tested positive for the coronavirus. As long as he's not laying in a hospital bed on a ventilator, and is walking around and maybe has, I don't know if he has flu-like symptoms. He may just have the coronavirus and be perfectly healthy. So we don't really know exactly how daunting it is as far as having a diagnosis of having it, but it's a start. And it's going to help them as far as, well, we got to go out and test the other players in the league and then find out who has it and who doesn't. And if a guy like Von Miller has it, then we may have to quarantine him so it doesn't spread. So, all I can say is, it's the first step that, a player who's a marquee guy in the league has been tested positive. So we'll see what goes on from there. It's sort of like a work in progress.
Correct, Bill. Not only though, when the first case came out by the Utah Jazz, you know how swiftly Adam Silver did close down the league. So now, as if Roger Goodell doesn't have a lot to think about with the NFL draft next week, now he has to take this into consideration. Okay, one of our players indeed did it. Okay, now what do I have to do to try to be, proactive about this whole thing? So.
Yeah, and of course there are going to be some guys that are going to sit back and go, hey, look, this reminds me like when Magic Johnson had AIDS.
Right.
Okay, there's a guy in the Utah Jazz, so I'm not playing. Okay, right. And, you have to respect everybody's, health concerns. So if a guy, walks into the locker room and has the coronavirus, guys are going to sit back and go, I don't want him in the locker room because I may catch it from him because he's carrying it.
Right.
So I think, and I actually watched a guy on the show the other day said, our way out of this might be to test the 325 million people we have in our country. Right. If 40 million people test positive for the coronavirus, or let's say 4 million people test positive for the coronavirus, then we need to quarantine those 4 million people, and everybody else goes back to work. Because it looks to me like the yield curve's going down a little bit, and it's starting to flatten out. And I know that they're talking about opening up certain states by May 1st. To get the economy going. So it's going to be that balancing act. So Vaughn is the first one on the on the high wire, as I like to say.
Okay, good example about Magic Johnson, Bill. I'm glad you brought it up. When he had the HIV virus, everybody got nervous. They thought it was a death sentence, but Magic not only had the funds to get the best medication, but once upon a time we thought AIDS was an automatic killer. Some people even ranked it along the lines of cancer. But once we got the vaccines and medications, and there was hope for those individuals that were diagnosed with it. Let's stay on to the NFL, okay? It looks like Caesars is predicting that Tom Brady's Bucs are going to win 9 games and the Patriots at 8.5. Is that realistic?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, there's, again, a lot of unknowns with the Patriots. We have no idea who the quarterback's going to be. It might look like it might be Stidham. Maybe they'll get an Andy Dalton out there, or maybe they'll trade up and get somebody else. Who knows? And with the Tampa Bay, yeah, I mean, I think 9 wins is reasonable. You got Tom Brady there, probably the greatest quarterback of all time. And Tampa Bay did play a lot better in the second half, and they're projected to be better, and the division is not like the strongest division. So I could see 9 wins there and 8 for the Patriots, or close to 9. So I think it's I think it's fair.
What do you think, Bill?
You know me, if I'm betting, I'm going to take the 9. If it's 9.5, no. If it's 9, I'm going to take the Bucs. I'm going to lay off the Pats because of an unknown. 8.5. But also, I know this is one of those bets you make at the last minute just to start the season, because a lot of stuff could happen between now, and the start of the NFL season. And, probably it's one of those bets you lay off and pass because there's other bets. But, if I'm betting, I'm taking the over with the 9 with the Bucs because of Brady, a proven commodity. And I think that, the team is going to get hot down there just because of new blood. But the Patriots, I'm laying off that one. There's too many unknowns.
Yeah, so are you saying 8?
I still think the class of the division, though.
Well, do you think the Patriots are good for 8, or would you say maybe a little less because of the unknown, Bill?
Well, I'm not going to bet. I'm not going to bet against Belichick. Okay. I mean, I also know that I'm going to wait until after the draft because they're going to reload. They got a lot of draft picks.
Right.
Okay, and I go with organizations that know how to win championships. Okay. I mean, I'm watching O'Brien taking a lot of heat down here because of DeAndre Hopkins. Okay, and I'm very confident in his ability to get another division title down here because we got a really solid young quarterback. We got one of the best left tackles in the league. Okay, and we've got Brandon Cooks, who's a solid receiver, and we're able to build more depth. So I just think from an organizational point of view, I'm not going to bet against the Pats, but I'm going to wait and see what they do until after the draft before I put any money on the 8.5.
All right. Well, that's okay, Bill. That's
like flipping a coin.
Yeah.
But I'll definitely take the Bucs in the 9. I just think that'd be a great bet. Plus, I live down there.
Just to give you a different perspective at the moment, and again, Bill and Rick, we could talk about this after the draft, but my hunch says to me the Patriots win 7 to 8 games. That's what I think. That's just my gut feeling. But again, TBD to be determined. We'll stay on to one more NFL subject. And there's a report that the NFL has a pandemic contingency plans that will include empty stadiums and a shortened season. Bill, you lead off this time.
Well, I think, people don't want it, like we talked about the other day, people don't really want to hear this yet until we're out of the woods with this coronavirus, but they got to have contingency plans, okay? That's just the way it is. All right, so I'm looking at playing in empty stadiums. So that might be a way to, we got to get the economy going, so that might be the only way to do it. We may have a third of the guys that are on active rosters not playing because they have the virus, like Von Miller. So we got to wait until they're cleared. We got to probably have to have some kind of social distancing policy where people can sit in the stands, but they got to, there's a lot of unknowns here. But I could, I see that there's going to be some kind of NFL season. But my personal gut instinct is it's overkill right now because we're erring on the side of caution. This thing could really start to move up big time after the 4th of July. And by August, most of this stuff is behind us and most of the states are allowing us to play. Although, Gavin Newsom in California is sitting there going, there's not going to be any games for the 2020 season. So there may be some movement of stadiums to states that don't have the coronavirus. and stay out of the hot spots like New York, just because the data says that we can get away with it, where in other states we can't. And we may basically take that contingency plan that's basically a structure right now and modify it even more to have more flexibility so we get more people in the games and get the economy going a little faster. So, yeah, it seems to make sense for me right now, but I just think it's going to change. It's a work in progress.
Okay. Go ahead, Rick.
Well, I mean, like I said, another unknown, a big question mark. Some states, it's getting a little better, but it's still high. We're still getting people testing positive. People are still dying. People are still getting sick. The scary part is some people have it and don't even have the symptoms. Look at George Stephanopoulos. His wife was sick, and he tested positive. He had no symptoms. So I think that's the scary part, is that people can carry it and have it and could possibly spread it, but they don't have the symptoms. So, well, like I said, we don't know what's going to happen. We will see what happens. I know we need to get everything started, but at the same time, it doesn't make any sense to start anything when you haven't solved the problem yet. And we haven't solved the problem yet. I know things are state by state. Some states say they're going to open on May 1st. It ain't going to happen on May 1st. That's just not realistic enough. And it's just a day by day thing. And like I said, this thing is it's not going to go away any sooner. And people just need to practice more social distancing. They're not doing it. People are still going to the beaches. People are still going to the parks. People are still thinking, oh, this is not a big deal. It's just the flu, or I'm not going to get it, So, a lot of people are not practicing that. So, we just need to get better at it and wash our hands and stay clear and be safe. And like I said, it's a big question mark what's going to happen.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't be surprised if a few like Salt Lake City probably goes into play here for one season if they need a temporary. I wouldn't be surprised to see the NFL have Chase Field made for an NFL stadium, because that's only 4 hours away from the Raiders. So there might be some other cities that aren't as much at risk that could get a piece of the action for 1 year. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of TBDs. All right, guys, let's go on to our next topic.
Your Arizonas, your Texases, your Nevadas.
Yeah.
Stay away from New York, maybe Florida. States where the virus isn't so high. I can imagine somebody getting, a season ticket holder. In order for you to renew your tickets, you have to take a test to make sure you have the coronavirus before they let you in the stadium. So there may be paperwork involved where in order to go to a game, you have to have been tested, and you have to be able to show that you are asymptomatic or have it or whatever, so they can make sure that, they keep the spread minimized. So there's going to be a lot of creativity here, but I just think somehow we're going to make a dent in this.
I just found out tomorrow that Jacksonville is opening up their beaches at 5 o'clock to the public. Now, whether that's a great move or not, I don't know, but the mayor has indicated...
That's crazy.
That's
crazy. Insane.
Oh, I think
that's
so.
That's insane.
But they are.
And then Georgia, too, the governor there is opening up the beaches there. And like I said, some governors or whatever, and it just, this is not political. It shouldn't be a political thing, but unfortunately some have made it political. And it's just, to me, it's just very irresponsible to open up beaches or anything like that. We're going to have huge gatherings of people.
Yeah, I question those, but nevertheless, that's the reality that we're looking at. We're going to go on to a different form of football called soccer. Bill, you went ahead and nailed this one, and now you have a chance to brag a little bit, okay? Seattle Sounders owner says the MLS could lose billions of dollars during the COVID-19 lockdown. Since you've talked about this before, Bill, you lead off, and then you follow suit, Rick.
Okay.
Well, the owner of the Seattle Sounders, Al Hanauer, I kind of listened to what he said. And one thing I will say about the MLS is the owner, they have solid ownership. It's rock solid. So they know that they're going to have to make some adjustments, and maybe do exactly what the NFL is doing, stay out of the hot zones. But they're going to have some kind of season starting around June. So they're in the same boat. And I'm sure that, the MLS has got some certain cities that, are really strong, and then there's certain cities that are weak sisters. So it's like in any other business, you're going to have some franchises that are going to suck wind. You're going to have some franchises that might even get stronger. But the thing that I saw that I liked is that the MLS seems to have their ownership structure very solid. I think they've, been able to, the fact that the league kind of runs everything is a single entity structure. I think a system in which all the players' contracts are held by the league, and there's no system of promotion, regulation. That system is going to be beneficial during that crisis. So, it's going to be rough for them, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as we were predicting either because of the way that the league is structured financially.
Go ahead, Rick.
Well, first of all, it's football, not soccer.
Yeah,
so,
right.
I always like to have fun with that. But like I said, it's just
Are we living in Europe now?
Yeah, well, soccer is a European Latino
football. Okay, I get you.
We're the only country that calls it soccer. You go everywhere else, it's football. But that's another discussion. But we'll see what happens with the MLS. Like I said, their ratings are not the greatest. Just like I said before, soccer or football is not an American sport. It's a Latino European sport, and for them to say they're going to lose billions of dollars, that's not a big shocker. That's not a big surprise. And they have very popular teams like Portland. Portland does very good, and you have other teams that struggle, that don't do very good. We're going to get a team in 2021 to play in Charlotte. So, like I said, it's just a wait and see what happens. But if they have a good, solid foundation and great ownership, then they should be okay. But like I said, like everybody else, everybody's going to suffer from this. Some are going to rebound, some are not. Some is going to take a while, and some are going to go away like the XFL. So we'll see what happens with Major League Soccer. But like I said, they're in the same boat with the NFL, same boat with Major League Baseball, same boat with NHL. It's just a wait and see, and it's a day by day.
All right.
Yeah. Players are going to take voluntary pay cuts. They're going to get donations. There's relief funds out there. Hell, Hanover matched. They put up $600,000. And the fund is designed to help small businesses and nonprofits. So, I think the MLS, they'll all stick together and they'll figure out a way to have a season. I just think there might be a little bit of a consolidation, like there always is. There may be, over the next couple of years, one or two franchises that may need to restructure or relocated. Just because some markets just are not making a comeback from the corona. But I don't think it's the death of MLS at all. But I think there's some franchises that can lose tens of millions, like Seattle. They kind of know it, and they're in a situation where they can, as an outfit, maybe lose $1 billion or as a league and make it through.
Well, one sport where there isn't a wait and see is the PGA, because the PGA Tour plans to resume the season without fans in June. They're targeting June 11th. Well, if there's any sport that could start up within a reasonable time frame, I don't think there's anyone better suited than the PGA. What do you guys think? Rick, you lead off.
Well, that'll be interesting. I can see them doing a PGA event with with no crowds there. It's a quiet anyway, so make it more quieter, I guess, with no crowds. And,
exactly.
And they all play separately. They're not all in a big group. So I can see some PGA having some type of event, but, some are going to have to travel too. And, some might not want to travel. Some might want to. Some might not want to play. Some might say, hey, I got a family and I don't want to be exposed to it, especially if I'm flying. So I don't know if they're going to have the PGA in just one event in a couple cities like Major League Baseball proposing. So I think that's going to be interesting. So you're going to see some that are going to play and some are just say, you know what, I'm not going to do it because it's just the risk is too high.
Well, they're going to spread their events around. So I think that may be as close to normalcy of any of the sports that you can probably get. But I guess they're going to just gauge it week at a time. But at least they have a plan set in place in June anyways. And they have many of the majors later in the year. So I have to admit, of all the sports out there, the PGA seems like the one that could conceivably get started quick, depending on what happens with WWE and the UFC. So, Bill, what's your take on this?
Well, I have to laugh. The first tournament that they're going to have is the Charles Schwab Challenge in Texas. So that fits into right what we were talking about, the demographics of maybe a state that is not a hot zone for the coronavirus. The second thing, it's a discount broker. So, not a full-service broker, so it's not like the Masters for the U.S. Open or the U.S. PGA Championship, where they've actually haven't canceled them, they've rescheduled them. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So this kind of reminds me of baseball. They're going to go out there and get their feet wet a little bit and see on a smaller scale and see how the Charles Schwab Challenge does in Texas. Then the next one is the RBC Heritage, which is going to be in the 21st of June. All right, and the U.S. Open is going to be moved to September. Then you got the Travelers Championship at TPC River Highlands is going to be on the 25th and the 28th of June. So and then as this thing moves on the Memorial Tournament is going to be in July. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to have a stepping stone to see how this goes, starting out with a discount broker before they wind up being a full-service broker where they can have the really big tournaments like the Masters in the fall. And I think baseball is going to do the same thing. I think football is going to do the same thing. So, it's sort of, starting the wave and trying to get it going.
Okay, let's go on to another sport. And I remember many, many years ago, I covered ladies tennis and some of the young stars like the Andrea Yeagers, the Tracy Austins. We talked about a lot of the teenagers, but here's one that really stuck out at me. Coco Gauff, who's 16 years old, has been struggling with depression, and she contemplated taking the year off. Now think about this, guys, for a moment, okay? She struggled to deal with the height and mental pressure brought on by the rapid rise in tennis. She actually advanced to the fourth round in Wimbledon, her first major championship appearance, and she also had a fourth round at the Australian Open, I believe, and I think it was 15 Australian Open. But anyways, the main objective here is you've got a young player with all this pressure, and she hails from Delray Beach, Florida. Can you sympathize with what Coco Gauff is going through, knowing that so many you wonder how many of these youngsters go deep into their careers and the extent of her longevity, especially now that you have social media and there are so many ways that she can be scrutinized. So, all right, Bill, you lead off with this one.
Well, how I joke around about how when I played ball, we had a lot of fun because it wasn't the kind of economics that there are on these young kids today. All right, and this is a girl that's a 16-year-old who was taking the tennis world by storm. All right, and it's really, really tough to start working out at age 15 and be under that kind of scrutiny. Okay, and I read a little bit about it before in my, getting ready for the show. And one of the things that I could understand was that they're comparing her to, the sisters, Serena and Venus Williams.
Right.
And the girl hasn't even started out yet, and they're already putting a lot of pressure on her because of the media. So I think that, she was at a point right now where she said literally she didn't want to get up and go to practice. Now, as soon as she wound up beating Serena, that kind of changed. And I think, really, what I'm seeing out there is a lot of self-imposed pressure on young kids who aren't mature enough to handle it. She was isolated from her friends. They don't have a chance to be kids. Okay, and it can be really tough. I remember Jennifer Capriati in Tampa. She wound up getting scrutinized for doing what a normal kid would do, at her age, and they made a big deal out of it and almost ruined her. And I just think that, we need to back off a little bit, okay, on making these kids into something they're not at such young ages because it's a major problem. You got to have kids, want to be kids. And I think today we're so money-driven, and it's the same thing with this coronavirus. We have to do risk-reward. We can't have the cure ruin this country and be worse than the actual disease. Okay, we can't take a 15-year-old and make her into something when she's not ready for money and ratings to keep tennis alive. So there has to be a real good balance. And I think when kids like this step up and are honest and say the things that we really went through at a younger, I can remember some of the stuff that I went through when I was a ball player and sitting back and going, nobody really cares about us. And nobody's hearing our story because we don't have any platform, number one, to tell people. And number two, we're not making any kind of money where people are going to think that we're, this or that. Now, here it is 30, 40 years later, and you have kids making millions, and you have social media. So these kids are under an intense microscope where, maybe Scott, when we played, it wasn't as bad.
Oh, yeah.
But it was still, these are still kids that have needs. So when you talk about Andrea Jaeger and you talk about Jennifer Capriati, it wasn't as glaring, but even though the problems were just as serious.
Right.
So it's a question of magnification. And I will say this to you. It looks to me like she's rebounding a little bit because she's still playing. She's identified the problem. And the reality of it, she spoke up, which I think took a lot of guts. And, I just think that we're going to learn from this so that the youngsters coming up behind, don't have to go through this kind of scrutiny and what I call mental anguish and stress that may not be, a lot of it's self-imposed. But at the same time, there's tremendous pressure on these kids because the media is making you into something that you may not. And the girl's not even out of the blocks yet. It kind of takes the fun out of the sport. So I think we're going to have to, get that pendulum moving in the middle where we have a balance of letting a woman be a child and have a social life with her friends and at the same time be a productive a tennis player, and making it more fun for the kids or they're just going to quit. I'm starting to see this a lot. I'm watching a woman, Ronda Rousey, who's quitting wrestling and is throwing wrestling under a bus. And you got the media turning around and going, well, this could be a work for a promotion, and we don't really know yet because there's so much money involved.
Right.
So there's a gentle balance when you're dealing with people that are, that love the sport and want to play for the love of the sport, and all the fun is being taken out of it because of what I call artificial stress.
Mm-hmm.
Due to media and expectations that may not be necessary and are kind of what I call hyped.
Bill, I'll take out of that artificial stress. That's you're on target there. All right, Rick, what are your thoughts on Coco?
I think it's very, very tragic. I remember when I was 15 or 16 and the dumb things I would say. And I remember I was just getting like a spanking from my parents or told never to do that. And these poor kids are on television, on Sports Center or Entertainment Tonight or these real gossipy shows on the E! Channel talking about it, dissecting it. And it's like, my goodness, they're like 15, 16 years old, and I mean, it's like, the pressure they are in to be compared to Venus Williams and Serena Williams is ridiculous because she's just starting out. And can she be someone that could be the next big superstar? She could be. Could she be someone that, what if she just becomes a really good player? Is she a has-been now? So I just feel bad for a lot of these teenagers today with all the social media. Thank God I didn't grow up with all this in high school, with all the cyberbullying they do now and people just, posting videos of somebody on Facebook to embarrass them. And, you can watch it within seconds. So, I feel bad for her and it looks like, but she's a strong woman. For her to come out right away and say she has a problem, she can motivate a lot of other people her age or even people my age and say, wow, that took a lot of guts. And look at her. She's, famous and rich and everything like that. And even she struggles. So I think she could use that as a motivation, maybe speak about it and things like that. So, I hope Coco does well. And, like I said, don't believe the media, don't believe the hype, just keep playing. And like I said, a lot of people, a lot of friends, agents, whatever, a lot of money involved. So they're going to, just, I know I'd say this, but maybe like users because they're going to make a lot of money off of it. So I just hope she does well. I hope she's successful. And I hope she is the next Serena Williams or the next Venus Williams. That'd be sensational. She seems to have her head on straight. So I just applaud her for coming out and saying that I couldn't say that at 15 or even in my 40s. So I applaud her for doing that.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about Coco is she has a fan in me. She really does. Anybody in their right mind that doesn't root for her needs their head examined because I tell you what, she represents the good of what tennis needs. And nowadays, with tennis not getting as much, doesn't get the major love that a lot of the ones do. You always look for a story like this to try to provide future stars, and Coco certainly has a great upside. And you're right, Bill. It just took a lot of guts for her to come forward with it, and I hope she can learn to have fun with it. Two more topics to get to. One is a very tragic one. Roy Halladay, 40, was doing stunts when His plane crashed. He had amphetamines in his system, according to the National Transportation Safety Board, about 10 times the therapeutic levels in his blood, along with a high level of morphine. And he nosedived into the Gulf of Mexico on November 7th, 2017. The Hall of Famer. He was inducted posthumously there. Gosh, that's just too bad because, Roy Halladay, to me, when he left the game, he was one of those guys that could have played in any era because he did have a lot of complete games. He was a big money pitcher. So really unfortunate to hear that he had drugs and his life ended at 40. I don't understand why he took them. And there's so many questions that are unanswered, but this was a death that should not have happened. And I don't know how a guy gets in the air with the amount of drugs and does stunts like that. But rest in peace, Roy. But you've left a lot of people trying to figure this one out. All right, so with that said, Rick, you start off.
Well, it is sad. It's sad when someone dies so tragically. It's sad that, his wife's a widow, his kids are fatherless and things like that. And it's just a tragedy all around. And it's even, sad, or you just scratch your head when you find out that they died from drugs, sort of like the Marlins pitcher who was in that boating accident, and they found out that he had cocaine in his system. It's just unfortunate, but, we all have demons. We all struggle with things. And, it's just a part of life. It happens all the time. So, rest in peace, Roy Halladay. And I think a lot of times, media likes to sensationalize things and say, well, maybe if he didn't do those things, he'd still be alive. So, I hate when they do that. I hate when when someone dies and they pick apart, well, this is what he did. He took this, he took that. Maybe he shouldn't have done this. Maybe he should have done that. We all make mistakes, and he made a mistake, and unfortunately it cost him his life. And it's sad all around. But I'm always going to remember Roy Halladay. It's a great pitcher he was with the Blue Jays, the great pitcher he was with the Phillies. And he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And I just grieve for his family. I grieve for his friends, for the fans, and everybody else. So it's just sad all around.
I'll second that, Rick. I grieve for his family, his friends, and everybody affected. In fact, his wife is a single parent. It's really too bad. All right, Bill, what's your take on this one?
All right, well, I deal in the real world. And I've had to deal with, a guy who wrote a book, Jim Bouton, Ball 4, who tried to tell people the truth about greenies and speed in Major League Baseball. We don't deal in reality when it comes to drug use by players. We never will. And Jose Canseco tried to come out and tell people what really going on. They just threw him under a bus. Mm-hmm. Okay, and you kind of sit back and, Barry Bonds has stood his ground. And, what most people don't understand is most guys that play Major League Baseball have some kind of performance-enhancing substance abuse problem, period. Because we all get treated like racehorses. Okay, and the truth is never going to come out about that, and I have to laugh because I witnessed it when I played ball, but I also had some friends of mine who were hardcore drug addicts and some of the best players out there. Okay, and I witnessed it. I witnessed Hollywood Henderson. All right, 2 days before the Super Bowl, was in my buddy's office snorting blow for 2 days. Okay, we don't deal with it because it costs us money. We cherry pick who we want to talk to about it. Okay, that's why Jose Canseco said we have the haves and have not. When I did my research on this, first of all, I lived in Newport Richey, Florida, where my house is. The accident happened 8 miles from my house.
Really? I
go out there on my boat all the time. I actually drove out there on my boat to the accident scene. Okay, now I'm going to say this to you real quick. Hey, Roy Halladay was a hell of a pitcher, but he's also an adrenaline junkie. Okay, he probably played baseball and was on greenies when he pitched. And he was a great player. And when guys have that kind of lifestyle for a long, long time, okay, I had a friend of mine, Darren Dalton. Darren was a catcher for the Phillies. I mean, I know, his lifestyle when it came to smoking weed. He had 6 DUI arrests. Okay, and, people just don't want to hear the truth about people who need help. Darren is deceased. Okay, and, a lot of it was having to perform on bad knees, so he's taking painkillers and a lot of stuff. In the case of Halladay, okay, he had an amphetamine level that was 10 times therapeutic levels.
Right.
So it's one to be taking amphetamines, but you're talking So he's a speed junkie. Okay, in his blood, he's got a high level of morphine in his system. That tells you that this guy's in pain. Okay, antidepressants. He's suffering from. He's being depressed because of injuries, and he's got to take morphine. All right, so of course it's going to impair his judgments. This guy was dive bombing, okay, with a plane he had just bought a month earlier, okay, and pulling the plane out of a nosedive 5 feet from the water. All right, this maneuver puts loads of 2 times the gravity on a plane, okay, in a light sport 2-seat amphibious plane. So, no disrespect intended, he crashed into the water going 85 miles an hour.
Right.
All right, now you sit back and you go, wonder whether this guy was trying to kill himself, whether he was out there just trying to get high off of, where he's at. And I think he's a guy that needed help, okay, didn't get it, because he's very, very wealthy, and he's living an image that doesn't necessarily live up to what people think he should be, a star pitcher with no problems. Okay, when you take a look at something like this, and it took them 2 years to come up with the autopsy report, I'm sitting here going, okay, it's one thing to go out there and maybe take one greenie and maybe smoke a little weed and have a lot. Oh, that's fine. But to sit there and have the levels that he had here and be mixing them, no disrespect intended, but that's like drinking a Molotov cocktail. When you're mixing antidepressants with morphine, okay, and amphetamines, okay, and no disrespect intended, man, he should have gotten help a long time ago, because this is more serious than dive bombing on a plane. Okay, and the fact that Major League Baseball hasn't addressed this with their players, okay, just lets me know that Major League Baseball needs to take a look at its drug policy, because they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. Because this guy's retired and probably did this for a long, long time. And I'm going to say this to you real quickly. I tried out in Major League Baseball, and I had a guy who signed me by the name of Doc Ellis, who pitched in the World Series on LSD. Mm-hmm. Okay? So I feel in the real world. Okay? And, the thing is, people don't want to hear the truth. Okay, I look at all these soft images. I could go into a discussion right now about all the players in the National Football League that are playing on human growth hormone. Why? And what do the owners want to do? They want another game. And the guys are sitting back and going, dude, I'm killing myself and taking 10 years off my life, okay, and I'm playing a sport, for X amount of dollars. And Warren Sapp goes even farther and says this is slave trading. So, again, we're going to have a balance when it comes to drug use by players. Either we're going to have to stop talking about all this stuff and ruining players to say, let them do what they're going to do. Because this has been going on for 20 or 30 years, and it's a freaking joke. That's my personal opinion.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good enough, and I think both of you guys are totally right. I've had morphine in my system with some of the operations that I had. Let me tell you, I know what that drug does to you. I've had it numerous times, so everything you're talking about gets home to me. Our final topic of the night, we'll take that racehorses analogy that you had, Bill, and the next one is considered a racist. The person that I'm referring to, okay, Chip Ganassi fired 27-year-old Kyle Larson following the use of a racial slur. He's been with Ganassi for 7 years. He used the N-word, which was directed at his spotter, who was white. McDonald's credit one bank pulled their funding, and it looks like it's an 8-digit blunder for a guy who would have been a free agent. Well, you know what? The N-word is definitely not necessary, and you can get blackballed, and it gets expensive when you use it. So, Bill, I have a feeling you'll have a very extensive opinion on this one. So go ahead, and then Rick will go, and then we'll wrap up the show after this one. Go ahead, lead off,
okay.
Bill.
Well, the first thing I'm going to say, the expression loose lips sink ships.
Right.
This is nothing more than sponsors can't move their products because of the perception that one of their players is a racist. And it's all nonsense. That's the way I look at it. But you also need to know, in the world we live in, you got to be smart enough to keep your mouth shut and be able to speak the speak and walk the talk. And the reality of it is this: I try to do my research on this. Now, I'm going to say this to you, right? I've had this talk with my kids in my high school. I worked at a predominantly black high school. I walked in there, and let me tell you something. You want to talk about reverse racism? particularly when Trump got office, and I made jokes about it. Okay, because kids are not educated on their own culture. Okay, and every kid in my class used the N-word. So the first thing I said to them, when you get older and you're in it going for a job interview and you're black and you start talking to your neighbors or you start talking to someone else like that, you're not going to get hired. And they're looking at me like, what? I said, I was a black history major at Princeton. I said, if you understand your culture and you understand the use of the word, it doesn't matter whether you're black or white, you're not going to use that word because highly intelligent people know it's offensive. Doesn't matter whether you're black or white. And you need to know how to play the game within the game. Well, today, now, Scott, I'm going to ask you a question when you did your research.
Sure.
I found out, and, every case is individual.
Right.
I remember when Michael Vick got, really, I'm really proud of him because he went through hell for doing something that was ingrained in his culture with dogfighting. And there are people that really wanted him, they wanted him sent to prison for life.
Right.
And, when I listened to his story and I studied a lot, he had to go through a lot of sensitivity training and turn a huge negative into a positive. Well, actually, he's an activist for animal rights, and he's very well accepted by people that were willing to really, try to do him as much prison time as possible. So that's exactly what Kyle Larson is going to do here because it's all about image. But the thing what I wanted to ask you, Scott, was who did he say this to, number one? The second thing is the kid is Asian.
Right.
Okay, number three, is it could be slang because I've been in cars with NBA players where a white player says, listen, and he says the N-word with an A on the back of it. And I pulled my car over and I said, I love you, but I can't have you talking like that in my car because it's offensive. And the black players on the team were laughing because that's just the way the culture is. Right. So I believe this is something that we're going to outgrow. But when we're dealing with products like Firestone and you have major corporations that are brand sensitive, these players or these race car drivers or whatever else need to be taken to school on exactly what their company expects of them. So loose lips don't sink ships. But my question is, when he was saying this, he was playing some kind of online racing game, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Okay, who did he say it to?
Well, the bottom line is it got viral, and I didn't want to go too deep into it, Bill, to be honest with you.
But who was he talking to when he said it? Because I've seen kids out in the basketball court.
Right.
Okay, and I've seen the use of it. Now, I tell white kids it's unacceptable.
Right.
Okay, I had my students that were Afro-American or black sit there, and we had discussions about write an essay on what you think. And I had all kinds of mixed reviews. Okay, on some kids said it's okay, some kids said find it offensive. And I just think the more educated people are, they're not going to use that word at all.
Right.
But we also have a hip-hop culture that uses the word like every other time they're talking to each other.
Okay.
So you just sit back and you try to teach your kids, you got to take the higher end stuff because when it comes to money, okay, it's about image and people's perception, okay, and you have to be able to learn to talk in public. Right. You ever see some of these job interviews or some of these NFL, every other word you know, and you sit back and go, geez, this kid needs to take a class on how to take an interview. And the NFLPA is actually doing stuff like this. But I'm going to say this to you real quickly. I know exactly what's probably going to happen to this kid. He's going to go down to dirt racing, okay? He's going to make some money. It's going to cost him about $15 million. If he wants to race in NASCAR, he's going to have to do what Michael Vick did. He's going to have to go through a lot of sensitivity training. He's going to have to make sure that he convinces the American public that this is not part of how he really thinks. He's just spouting off because he has loose lips and didn't understand, where he's at because he's too young.
Okay, hold on. Let me go ahead.
That's just the way I feel about it.
That's fine. Let me add to that, Bill. Good points. First of all, the comments were they were headed toward a spotter. Okay, that's where they were headed. Item number one. Number two, I can remember many years ago, I had the good fortune of getting to know Al Campanis of the Dodgers. I met him at the 1981 baseball winter meetings. And here's a person who I don't feel was racist, but he had one bad moment, okay, on Nightline. And as a result, 40 years of employment with the Dodgers, an organization where Jackie Robinson had to break their color barrier, and he was gone. Now, I should point out, since I've covered NASCAR a lot, Bill, is with all due respect, NASCAR does not have a lot of minority drivers. Case in point, when I was out in Arizona, I was doing a motor racing show on a regular basis. I brought the subject on the air, and I talked about it with my co-hosts and so forth, okay? And you know what? They thought that they were worried about what I was going to say. What I made the reference to is you have to have a lot more money, okay, in auto racing than you do playing basketball. Were people a little bit nervous about my comments? No. I'll tell you, well, they were a little nervous, okay, and George Eichhorn came on and disagreed with them because you know what? The reality is basketball costs a lot less to get involved in NASCAR. Even though people were nervous about what we were going to say, we were on a regular AM/FM radio station, never got any further. We never got nailed by the FCC. One of my co-hosts said, you got to let me know what you're going to talk about ahead of time so we can prepare, which I understood. But NASCAR, in some ways, even though they made such a drastic action toward it, has to look at themselves in the face, okay? And they have to wonder, how many minority drivers do we actually have in the saddle, right? How many are really loaded? And they have to, I think NASCAR has to make it a point to go out there and give minorities a better opportunity that they get. Again, what Larson did was way out of line, and you're right, Bill, you've got to watch what he has to say. But when you're dealing with sponsorships like McDonald's and that credit card, everybody's worried about what it's going to do to the business plan. Then add COVID-19, and then you got a lot more complications than you really need at this point. And you saw how quickly those sponsors moved to get rid of Larson, much less Ganassi. Now Chip has to refigure this out. Who's going to drive that vehicle and try to make something out of it? So there's a lot of different layers here, Bill. But the comment was headed toward his spotter. And then as a result, when things go viral, social media, whatever, we all know where that's going to go. All right, Rick, Curti, you've heard Bill and I talk. What's your take on it?
Well, it's just incredibly stupid. I mean, you just can't say that word. I don't care who you're directing it to. I don't care if you're directing it to someone who's black, white, Oriental, Latino. I mean, I just don't understand it. I just don't understand why people have to use that word. It's to me it's an incredibly offensive word. I was raised to believe you'll never ever call anybody that word unless you want to get punched in the face.
Right.
And it's just stupidity. You just cannot say it. It's like Papa John. You know, he was on a conference call, uses the N word. Bye bye, Papa John. I mean, I just don't understand why people think this is okay to use. I don't care if they use it to call their friends that. And I hear it too from young kids who are African American, and sometimes they'll say that to me, and I say, "Look, man, I don't like being called. I don't like that word. I just don't like it. It's very offensive to me, and I don't like to use that. I never have. It's bad, and especially in today's world. I mean, you should know better than that. No one should tell you not to say it. You should know never to use that word. And you know, they had to do what they had to do. Sponsors, they have an image, and they say that they are sponsoring someone who could potentially be a racist or says racist things. You have to go. I mean, they just boom, you're out of here, go away. And we'll see what happens with him. It's going to be tough because there's, racing right now, because of the virus going on. There's nothing going on with that. So he might have to, I know he's going to lose millions and millions of dollars, but like I said, no sympathy for me. He should have known better. It was stupid. It was dumb. And he should never, ever use that word. I don't care what setting you are. He just should never use it, period. Especially today, in today's world where, as I like to call it, a papier-mâché society, where people get so offended because of the wind, or they get offended by every little thing is offensive now. And this it's crazy for people to still use that type of language. And if they think it's okay to use that type of language, I mean, you need to get your head examined. I mean, it's just wrong on all counts. So sponsors had to do what they had to do, and, shame on him for saying it.
Great example, though, with the Papa John's. Thank you for bringing that up, Rick. You're right. And I'll tell you, I think he was way out of line, and he is a racist in every sense of the word, and this is not the time to do it. So right now, will he get blackballed from the big show? You better believe he will. But, he made his bed. He's going to sleep in it. So with that said, guys, just so our listeners know, you're listening to the Motor Mouth, the Winter Show with Rick Curti here on the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. We're talking about the top headlines of the day. So with that said, okay, Bill Winters, let people know how they can follow you.
You can go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/C/Bill Winters 55. I'd love for you guys to subscribe. Then I also have my website, billwinters.biz. I'd love for you guys to read my book that I wrote back in the 80s, From the Outhouse to the Penthouse and Somewhere in Between. I think you'll see a smaller scale of what we're going on today because things really haven't changed, except it's accelerated and nothing's changed but the zeros economically, but it's still the same game. You can also shoot me an email. You can go to facebook.com, bwinters55, and I'd love for you to take a look at my Facebook page. We're actually posting my podcasts on there, on our shows, so you can get a quick, surf of our recent show. Should be on there within a couple of hours. You can also, of course, go to Spotify, iHeart, or Apple, or any other podcast search engines, and type in Motormouth, 2 words, and Wild Bill Winters, and you'll see our 29th show on there and our catalog of other shows, and start to follow us. You go to Instagram, and that's on the Florida Broadcasting Network.
South Florida.
Okay, which Scott will talk about in a minute. And then you can go me on Instagram, just under bwinters55. You can also follow me at Twitter at Bill_Winters55. And we'd love for you to join our audience as we grow.
Yeah, and also don't forget about our Bill Winters Wikipedia page. If you want to learn everything about Wild Bill, he certainly has an incredible background, to say the least. So look at Bill Winters Wikipedia page. All right, Rick, go ahead.
Well, you can contact me on my website at charlottebats.com. We have a petition on there. We also have a contact where you can contact me. I have an email address at cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com. That's cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com. You can find me on all the social media sites on Facebook at Charlotte Bats Baseball. We also have a group page at the Charlotte MLB. I'm also on Instagram at Charlotte Bats Baseball or Rick Curti. I'm also on Twitter at Charlotte Bats Baseball on my personal account, Rick Curti. And I'm also on LinkedIn at Rick Curti. And LinkedIn's a wonderful opportunity to meet people. This is how I met Scott, was just through LinkedIn, through networking. So, if you ever want to, connect or make some connections, that's always the best place to do it. So you're going to contact me on all those events and all those areas, and I'll respond to you as quickly as I can.
Yeah, and for those individuals that want to send us comments about the shows, they can do that at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. As for my social media information, first of all, you can go to my personal account on Twitter, Scoop, SCOOP, and then you punch in 5 3s, that gets you there. Also at Tribune South, follow us there. And we also have a Instagram page as well, South Florida Tribune, and then you can go to Facebook and follow us on South Florida Tribune. So got lots of certain ways to get a hold of us. And I got to tell you guys, last night we had an incredible show when we talked about sports movies. And not only did the 3 of us have a voice in it, but one of our new co-hosts, Dan Gudima, was on the broadcast. So again, go look now. You can also reach us at www.southfloridatribune.com, and that you'll see all of our broadcasts from every show, and we have a lot of them, folks, and so check out every one of them. But meanwhile, guys, once again, another excellent show. All I can ask for everybody to do out there is please maintain social distancing, be safe, stay at home, and also kudos to the first responders that are doing everything in their power to help those that are unfortunate, that have definitely come up with the virus. But any closing thoughts, guys?
Just one day at a time. We're blessed, and chill.
Okay. Rick?
Yeah, just follow people are saying. Don't go to parks, please. Don't go to beaches. Stay away. Don't visit people. Wash your hands. Stay safe. Take it one day at a time. This is not the end of the world, but at the same time, don't be cavalier about it. Don't think you're bulletproof. I mean, anybody can get this, and some people have the symptoms, some people don't. Just please be safe and use common sense.
Yeah, the worst thing that can happen during a pandemic is you take something like this for granted. So whatever you do, please don't do it. And we hope that we've done a pretty good job for you folks to be able to provide you some good entertainment, and so you can take your mind off of a lot of what's going out there. That's the one thing that we really strive hard to do, and we'll continue to do our best to stay on that track. So on behalf of Bill Winters and Rick Curti, my name is Scott Morgan off the Motor City Madmouth, and we will go ahead and see you on Tuesday night. Have a good weekend, everybody. From everybody here at the Motor Mouth and Wild Bill Winters with Rick Curti here on the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. Good night, everybody.